Yo guys, welcome back. Today I wanted to go ahead and talk today about some news we got in Lost Ark. They finally are addressing some of the community feedback and anticipated changes that we've been asking for. And I wanted to talk about why these are important, but also talk about why it's important that we structure feedback in a meaningful way and then give that to AGS. That way they can do what they can to make the game better. All right, so let's just go ahead and go through it real quick first, and then I'll kind of talk about it as we go to each section. So the first bit, they're going to be doing the nerfs to the end game balance. So they're talking about specifically advanced honing costs, and then also transcendence for both armor and weapon. You know, they mentioned that gold income isn't 1-to-1 in the Korean version. I think specifically what they're talking about is changing all of the raids. That way, you know, Echidna and Behemoth and stuff like that are going to be earning less gold. So it looks like we're not going to be getting those gold nerfs, at least not right away, but they are still going to be giving us the positive cost reduction of these other things. So obviously this is good for a lot of different reasons. Obviously the nerf the cost. Our version of the games isn't the same as Korea. And so like it says, our gold income isn't the same. We didn't have as long in between systems or in between raids during this period either. So a lot of people in Korea had already done a lot of their advanced honing, but for us, because of the cost of our materials and stuff like that, a lot of people skipped on doing that. You know, Memorizer had a video where he was talking about it costs, 80% more for us to do our advanced honing than it does for Korea, and that's because of the auction house costs and stuff like that. So that's just kind of, giving a little context on that. But the not changing the gold on the rates is actually a really good change in my opinion for a lot of different reasons as well. Something to know and to like really understand and realize is that Korea isn't in the same spot for their gold earning raids. They have the new Act 3 raid, they have their new strike raid, or at the same time they got all of these gold nerfs to their raids. We don't. We are going to be getting that next raid in a few months, but if they were to nerf the gold of those raids already, it means even, peak level players with 1700 rosters would be getting a gold nerf. And that's not really one, it doesn't make your players feel good when they're playing the game correctly and they're still getting hit with nerfs for things like this. But two, you have to kind of understand why they're trying to do those nerfs in the first place. So they want in Korea to make 1640 not the gold standard of efficiency anymore. That's what their goal is. And while that should be the same in the West, there are a little bit of a difference. A lot of our top earners, even like I said, your main characters are still earning gold from that. So right now we have Rel Shaza, we have Aegir, and then you're either going to be running a Behemoth or a Echidna. And both of those raids getting nerfed would mean that, like I said before, even the top earners for everyone's account would still be getting hit with a gold nerf. And then two, we are at a point now where a lot of our stuff is very, very expensive. Books are very expensive, gems are very expensive, materials are incredibly expensive in comparison to KR. So nerfing our gold income, while it might seem like that would have a direct effect, and it could because of the alt rosters and things like that that people often mention, it also hurts the buying power of players who are playing the game correctly, the way they should be playing, and that's not really what they want to do. So I think what they're trying to do here, and something that I've asked them to do in the Discord and stuff like that too, is maybe they're looking at trying to figure out an actual solution for this. If it is alt rosters and 1640 accounts that are causing a lot of the gold inflation, maybe we look at targeting how those players and those accounts earn gold rather than just nerfing the gold across the board. And that's my hope anyway. But essentially, what I hope and really think that they're trying to get at is that the current solution that KR is went with isn't just a one size fits all band-aid. And so maybe they're going to look into making their own creative solution for fixing that problem. So next up, they did talk about the gem system adjustments. They didn't actually give any details, but they do understand that some players have been focusing on playing multiple of the same character, for gem efficiency. Smilegate also doesn't really seem very clear about where they want this to go in the long term. A lot of people have been asking for roster-wide gems, which I think is probably the best solution. However, it does seem like Smilegate is a little hesitant to do that because they specifically said that they did not want to crash the gem market. I think this is one of those things where, Smilegate doesn't want to crash the gem market because people are spending to buy gems. That's just, what it is. In Korea, they're spending to buy gems. In the West, they're spending to buy gems. And so if they make the system better, people will probably spend less on that. However, I think that's the correct thing to do. If players are going to be upset because they invested in gems, I don't know. I don't really think that's a very good argument. I think it's the same argument that people use for cards, right? People would often say that, they shouldn't give out LLS 30 because, people spent money on getting cards. Well, dude, you got to use those cards for like 2 years before anyone else could use them, right? Before new players could use them, etc. Like it wasn't like you spent that money for nothing. You got to benefit from it for multiple years. So I think that in a lot of ways, it's kind of the same argument. I think crashing the gem market is completely okay. And I also don't think it would necessarily crash immediately. I think if they were to announce roster-wide gems, I think what a lot of people would instead do is they would take their gems and they would look to start getting, okay, I want 10s for every combination of my characters. And some characters might need 7 DPS gems, while other characters might need 7 cooldown gems. So suddenly I have a need for, you know, 7 level 10 DPS gems and 7 level 10 cooldown gems, which even if I fused all of my gems, I would not have. So it's not like the market itself would immediately die, it would just change. And it does mean that some of those whales would end up being quote unquote done with their gems, which I don't necessarily think would even be a bad thing. There is something to be said, especially in MMOs, about checking something off the list and being done with it. So there is value in that. Again, it's impossible to know for sure if it would just crash the market or if it would become different. I think, like I said, it would become different, but we'll have to see what ultimately Smilegate does end up doing. If it truly is just the bottom line for them, I think this is one they need to concede upon. The Korean players are currently sharing gems between characters and players who have the same roster type. So, for example, if I play a Slayer and somebody else plays a Slayer, I get Slayer gems and then I do my raids and then I give it to my friend and then he can use those gems in their raid. And that's how they're having to trade them and share them in KR, but that's not good gameplay, right? Like we can all see that there's inherent flaws with that. And players shouldn't feel like that's the only way to get their characters through the raid and through gatekeeping that other players are getting, because standards are going up, so it's causing bad gameplay. And when your game design is causing friction in your community and causing issues like that socially, I think it's a pretty good sign that something needs to be done, and in this case, something drastic. So next they went ahead and said that we are going to be getting the class balance changes, which I'm also very happy with. Personally, my class is getting a pretty significant buff. But obviously, not every class is. I think this should always be the goal, is that we should always be getting these updates fairly quickly after KR gets them. I'd appreciate it if we could ever have global releases. I understand why that might be difficult for them. But, worst case scenario, we should be getting all those balance updates every single the following month, in my opinion. It is not fun to see the new latest and greatest thing over in KR and know you're going to get that someday. And so that's part of the reason why I've always been trying to push for more global release of stuff, global release of Paladin, looking at you, or female Paladin, sorry. And so, yeah, like I said, it's just a lot more fun. It's a lot more interesting. It makes balance patches more exciting because you don't already have all the answers, right? You're going to get changes to tripods and abilities and get to maybe theory craft it. That's part of the whole fun of an MMO, is checking out things on patch day and seeing what's working, seeing what's not working, and then kind of going from there and kind of getting to re-fall in love with your class or, to fall out of love with your class and find something else. So I think that we should always be getting these balance changes ASAP. There was a localization update. Basically, they said that they are going to stop supporting both German and French localizations because they're just being underutilized. To be honest, especially in the West, we just don't have a lot of players, and so I can understand them spending time trying to get these VAs and stuff like that is just too much. It's too much cost for them and not enough, actual value, which I'm totally okay with. I imagine many players play with either, English or Korean localizations anyway, so it doesn't really affect me though, to be honest, because I play in English. Obviously, it sucks for players that did play in those languages, but I do think it kind of makes sense with the cost. If they were to come out and say tomorrow, we're not going to do English anymore, we're only going to keep the Korean version of the stuff, as long as they translated the text, or even then, like, you know even if they didn't translate the text, I would still, listen to Saint talk about the story or something like that. As long as I can understand or read my abilities and play the game, that's kind of all I care about. The rest of it, the voice actors and stuff like that, the story, whatever. Hopefully they'll go ahead and keep abilities and stuff like that in those languages. I just assume they're not going to be doing more updates on like the story and stuff like that in those languages. Okay, so this was a big one actually. Bus advertisement. We've all seen the memes, we've all seen the, password 10K, or sorry, or like the field trip. Yeah, they even said a field trip or on a journey or Netflix and chill, or whatever the wording that they're using to get around saying that something is a bus. It's just not necessary. Like, people bus in other games that don't allow busing in the party finder, and they do just fine. Just take it to your Discord, get rid of it. Stop trying to be the weird guys that are like trying to get around the rules. Just follow the rules, man. Like, if you're a busser and you have an issue with this, you're just out of touch, to be honest. This is good for all of us. This is good for the game, and it'll keep those busing Discord communities going the way that they probably should have been doing all along. Look, happy to see it, and I'm always appreciative of changes like this that make the player experience better. So they also said they are looking into the tier 3 Deadzone, which is 1580 to 1620. If you, shameless plug here, but if you follow my Twitch channel, you will know that we've been working on an NA East account. We are an NA West player. We've been working on an NA East account that is very much hitting these dead zones on some of our alts, and even, getting through to 1620 on our very first character was very, very difficult. So I'm happy to see that they are acknowledging this is an issue. My one problem with this is that they said we'll continue to support rosters that are challenged by this dead zone with more materials and books through the various events we have planned. Now, that is good for several reasons. One, a lot of our unbound gold at this point was actually being spent on the auction house to buy books for honing. If you are at this level and you are not buying books for honing currently, you're kind of throwing, to be honest. They are pretty cheap, even on NA East. I think they're, depending on the ones, the Brelshaza the Phantom books, so pre 1580, are pretty cheap. They're like, 50 gold or something. And the Decay books, the one for a con gear, 1580 plus to 1620, those books are also fairly cheap as well. But this still churns through, when you're using one for each tap, this still churns through a lot of gold and a lot of books. And so making sure the events give more of those things and more materials is all good. However, the other part of this is that, you know, realistically, they need to look at the cost of these things. If you go and look, and I'll go ahead and put it on the screen right now, the cost of the honing materials is far too high. So if you see right here at full plus 12, which is usually, I think, what happens when you transfer your gear to the new Akon gear at 1580, I think you normally get to 1585 or so. As soon as you start needing some of these additional taps, like 13 across the board, you're looking at 43,000 gold. A character down here doesn't generate that much gold, right? So you're looking at, a fairly low cost. I'll go ahead and put the gold earners on the screen for you guys too. just so you can see how much a gold earner at this level will make. But you quickly start to realize that, like, realistically, what you actually need to hit 1620 is this right here. Over 1,000,000 gold to do this on a con level gear. Like, I don't know if you're seeing this, but it's 7,000,000 shards. Like, sure, you're gonna have, your some books and stuff like that to help offset this cost, but the standard price, if you were tapping it without books, is too high. It is too high. It should not be that high. By the way, this is the worst case scenario. So this is kind of, you should never really hit this. Kind of ignore these costs here. It's just telling you when would be efficient to use like your solars and stuff like that. What I'm really looking at here is the sheer number of the different like materials that you would actually need. So this is the worst case scenario. Let's say average case scenario. It still goes to 500,000. Now, when your character is making, significantly less gold, look again, look in the upper right. I should have an actual breakdown for you. So with the power of editing, I came back. I was pretty off on my numbers, but for reference, in the upper right-hand corner, as you can see, it's about 4,300 gold for a con solo. For Brel 1 through 3, it's 2,400. For Brel Gate 4, you can do every 2 weeks. It's another 1,200. For Triangle Solo 1 through 3, it's 2,880. So what you see is a total of a weekly 9,600 gold. And then every 2 weeks, you can do Brelgate 4 as well and get 10,800 total gold for your 1580 character. And that is going to be bound too. So if you need to buy materials, let's say you need 4,500 Arehas, or you need 4 million shards, this cost is just too high, right? That's what it comes down to. This cost is too high, and books do not solve this. They help make it easier, and especially if they give us some of those books that are like, return 20% of the materials that you use, including your gold and stuff like that, like a 20% um, you know, rebate basically. Those will help, but again, that doesn't solve this issue. This is just too high. Even best case scenario, it's still crazy, right? Like you're still looking at 42,000 gold isn't too bad. 1.784 million shards is still a lot. So for reference, I'm getting about 47,000 shards from each of my Chaos Dungeon boxes. But Chaos Dungeons don't give shards at that level at 1580. But 47,000 shards per box, you get 3 boxes per week. I think the last box gives you a little bit more, but the first two are 47,000 for sure. I've recently done it. It's too high. It's too high. Let's say you could do 100,000 shards a day. This is still 17 days just to get enough shards. I think they really need to look at the cost of materials and understand that like the materials that we get, from the solo shop, maybe double or triple those, and then reduce the gold cost or something. The solo shop really helps, especially at this level, but it doesn't solve this issue when the cost is this high. Okay, and then finally, they say looking ahead, they're committed to keeping us informed and implementing updates as actively as possible. Um, but overall, I really wanted to talk about. It's really important that we give feedback on all of these things, right? So that's part of what this video is for. It's also part of the reason why I make posts on the official Discord. I encourage you to go and make feedback posts there as well. But when you do try and make a feedback post, let's really try and give a lot of extra detail. It might seem like it's too much. Maybe it would be overwhelming for some people to look at, or maybe it would take a little while to write up. But let's go ahead and try doing that as often as possible. And in some cases, it doesn't have to be that much. So, briefly, I'll just mention too, I've been making a post recently about wanting a global release for female paladin. I think I have done 3 or 4 posts by the time I was filming this. But it's kind of self-explanatory. It's in the title. I want a global release of paladin, or female paladin. But the reason why, and I always try and provide this feedback, is because of that fact that like when you get a new class, the new thing is cool, it's fun, it's hype, but it's more hype if it hasn't already been solved. Theory crafting goes into a lot of these classes on like what the optimized way to build your character is, And if you go and you watch those content creators and stuff like that, usually what will happen when a brand new class drops is several of them will sit for hours in Trixion. Not just content creators like doing that. Okay, so as I was saying, yeah, lots of different players all across the world like doing that kind of theory crafting and just kind of trying out the fun new toy, right? And so I try to convey that in a short little message saying that, it's kind of less hype when the class is already solved before we even get to make it in the character creator. So it doesn't have to be like a very insanely detailed message, but trying to understand and trying to convey to people, the reason why something feels bad or, is bad or something is very important when it comes to giving feedback. We want to give feedback in a way that can help them understand the pain point. It's not necessarily up to us to tell them how to fix that pain point, but it's very much a part of our job as the customer to explain to them what our pain point is and help them, zone in on what that issue is so that way they can come up with a change that will work for them and also fix our problem. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you made it to the end of this video, feel free to throw me a like or a comment if you want to. I greatly appreciate it, and it helps the videos and the channel. Uh, I'm going to be streaming more and have been streaming on Twitch, so go ahead and check me out over there. It's just Zara Nesson over on Twitch, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Have a good one. Peace out.